They automatically.
Hey, Tahira, good morning. Welcome
Good
here as
morning.
well. Good to see you.
Hey,
Do-do. Well, we will give it, as always, a few minutes here. Let me send my reminder. I'll give it a minute or two before that. All right. So we'll give it about 5 minutes and then we will jump in. In the meantime, I will throw up our agenda for the day. So everybody kind of knows what's going on. All right. A couple more minutes here. Let me send out one more reminder. How's everybody doing? Everybody have a good weekend since I did not see you yesterday. Good morning. Good morning. Who's that? Alicia, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And Amir, good morning, my friend. Welcome to you as well. Let me get everybody on my attendance here. Kalia, good morning to you.
What's up, bro?
Good morning, my friend. Welcome to you as well. Glad to have you with us today. And now we are trickling in here, it seems like. Shirley has joined us. Good morning, good morning. Excellent. And just like that, she's gone. Hopefully she'll be back. All right, we'll give it about another minute, and then we'll jump in while we are waiting for these last couple people to join us. I will throw our agenda back up. We'll do that now. All right, so as you guys can see, if you were here last class on Friday, things look very similar. We're still going to be tackling our story, homegoing. So we'll try to get through the rest of chapter 1. As you can see, is our objective here, and down here is, as always, our standard that we're going to be trying to tackle as well to read and comprehend literary fiction on grade level. So, this is the wrong one anyway. Okay. So, as you can see on number 1, we have a do now question, which is going to be this one right here. I would like us all to think about and respond to right now. What is point of view? How does it affect the way story is told? So when we think about a story, when we think about literature, what is point of view and how does it affect the way a story is told? Think about that, respond in the chat for me. Let's take about 2 minutes or so for this. All right. Any thoughts on this Let's check the chat, see if we got anything coming in there. Right. So nothing yet. Lisa, you kind of lost. No worries there. So if you haven't been with us in a class or two, we have started reading the story that this project is based around, which is the story is called Homegoing. So if you missed a class or two, the best way to get caught up would be to watch the recordings on the SFIL YouTube and or come to the Summit Labs in the afternoon and chat with me there. Okay. So we're going to continue with that story today. So those of you who have been here should be okay. To get started, I'd like us to think about this question I have shared on my screen with all of you and respond in the chat as it says here. That question is, what is point of view and how does it affect the way the story is told? All right. So I still don't see any responses in the chat for this. So let's give it another minute and I should have at least 2 responses in here because I know we have a good number of people this morning, and I know there's a lot of insightful individuals with us today. So you guys should be able to answer this. Think about it. You know, what is point of view? You know, what does somebody's point of view mean? If somebody says I have a different point of view than you, what are they talking about? And then how does point of view affect the way a story can be told? Think about it that way. All right, we'll check the chat again. All right. Still nothing in that chat. So let's give it maybe like another 30 seconds. I'd like to see at least something in here for this question from any of us. Okay. What is point of view? Think about it. If somebody says, I'm telling you this story from my point of view, what does that mean? All right. So what is point of view? What can our definition of point of view be? And then how does that affect the way a story is told? All right, good. Now we got some stuff in there. Excellent job. Thank you, guys. So Kira said, from the perspective of a character in the story, Kira said one's opinion and they're telling the side how they saw it. Yeah, definitely. From a better understanding from Kalia, so that could kind of, in terms of how it affects the story, all those are true. Very good job. So point of view is essentially that. It's how one person views or sees a story, kind of how they're telling their side of it. All right. So now to the second part of that question, how can the same story be affected by different points of view? Right. If we have one story being told by 2 different people, is that story going to be exactly the same word for word, or might it be a little bit different? What do we think? that question in the chat too, in case you missed it. But is the same story told from two different points of view going to be the same each time, or might it be different? Hey Eli, good morning to you. So what do we think? If you have one story, but there's two different points of view, is that story going to sound the same each time, or is it going to be different? So if two different people are telling the same story, is each of those versions of that story going to be the exact same word for word, or are they each going to be a little bit different? It's definitely different, Kira. Exactly. What makes it different? This is the whole thing that kind of ties it all together here. Why are those two stories going to be different? It's the same story, so why wouldn't it be the same each time? Right, they're telling it from their point of view. So each person's point of view changes how that story is told. I might see it one way and tell you one story. Somebody might see it a different way, tell you another story. Okay? Think about, a real world example, something that, is very pertinent right now with current events is we have a lot of social, racial justice, demonstrations, protests going on, right? Every time there is, an incident of a police shooting and an unarmed person of color, that whole thing is based on point of view, right? The police officer has one point of view and the victim has another point of view. Which point of view do people, view as the one that's right or wrong? That's a different story. But that's an example of how we can say, okay, they're talking about the same thing, but two vastly different stories because there's two different points of view. Okay. Does anybody else have an example, whether it's a real world example or the story that they've read, movie that they've seen, or anything where, different points of view can affect the story differently? Anybody else have any other examples of that kind of thing that they know about, that has happened to you, has happened to friends of yours? No other examples? All right, no worries. Keep that in mind, though, as we go through here. If anything pops up, like, oh, yeah, I remember this is a good example of having different points of view, okay? So the reason we're talking about point of view is because in this story, each chapter is from a different person's point of view. So we have the same story going on the whole time, but it's being told from several different people. So we can see how the story might change as the point of view of the person telling it changes. That's what we're going to be keeping in mind. That's what we're going to be focusing on when we start to fill out checkpoint 1, which we're going to talk about on Friday, right? But for today, we're going to keep moving here with this story. All right. If you were here on Friday, then this will seem familiar to you. If you were not here, then you can do your best to follow along today and get caught up by going back and watching the class recording or coming to chat with me in the Summit Lab. But I just put a link in the chat that you can click and pull up a PDF version of the story that'll look like this. Okay. And we're going to start right around halfway down page 15 on that PDF if you're following along that way, where it says the next week the old chief died. Okay. That's where we're going to be starting from. So if you want to follow along, visually, you can click that link. If the link doesn't work in the chat, you can copy paste it and then put it in your browser up here and do it that way. Okay. If you would rather just listen and follow along that way as I read, that is fine too. Okay. But either one of those ways will work. But I do ask that you do tune in one way or the other, because I am going to be stopping and kind of asking some questions, checking in on some things with this. All right. Is there anyone who was here with us on Friday that can give us a quick kind of, recap reminder of what's happened in our story so far? All right. Who have we met?
Shit.
What are their kind of relationships like? Anybody that can recap our story up to this point? Anyone who was with us on Friday that can give us a quick kind of recap of what we read, either in the chat or come off mute. All right, we know we met who appears to be our main character, Effia, right? She is a young woman in the Fonte tribe in Africa. Okay. But she was kind of born under unique circumstances. Does anybody remember what happened on the night that she was born that has kind of followed her and, put kind of like a negative connotation on her and her family? Does anybody remember what happened that night? I think we have a few people who were here with us on Friday that are here today. No, nobody can remember what happened the night she was born. Right? If you don't remember, it was that fire, right? So night she's born, there's a fire that destroys a lot of that family's yam crop. So basically all of their trade value is kind of gone. And we talked about that word resentment and how her mother, Baba, that we met, they don't have kind of the best relationship ever since the night she's born. She's born the night of the fire, and then she doesn't really breastfeed well, and so then her mom beats her, and the dad beats the mom, and it's kind of this ugly cycle, right? That's kind of how she grows up. And then right where we stopped on Friday, we discovered that she is now, has now become a woman. She has gotten her period for the first time, right? But her mom does something kind of suspicious there at the end. Does anybody remember what that was? Who was here on Friday? When her mom told her about that whole experience, what she told her to do. Does anybody remember that? Who can remind us before we continue reading here? What did her mom tell her to do or not do, maybe, in regards to her, now becoming a woman? Anybody remember? All right. I know it was over the weekend, so it's okay if you don't. But if you don't, she tells her like to keep it a secret. Basically, she says, "Hide this. We don't want anybody to find out. Only you and me know." And we kind of tried to predict why that might be. A couple of us last class said, maybe she's trying to protect her from something. She doesn't want her to be married off, because we talked a lot about arranged marriages, because that seems to be kind of the custom here in their tribe. All right. So we will continue now and see if that is indeed the case. All right. So again, if you're following along in the PDF, we are starting kind of halfway down page 15, where it says the next week. All right. And the next week, the old chief died. Funeral announcement. Oh, sorry. And one last time, we know that she is trying to get ready to be married to a Bhikkhu, who is the next in line to be the chief in their village. And that's kind of the boy she wants to marry. Her father very much wants her to be married to him, because then she'll be kind of the wife of the chief of the village. But we'll see if that is indeed what plays out. Okay. The next week, the old chief died. The funeral announcements went out to all of the surrounding villages. The proceedings would last a month and end with the Bhikkhu's chief ceremony. The women of the village prepared food from sunrise to sunset. Drums were made out of the finest wood, and the best singers were called upon to raise their voices. The funeral attendants began dancing on the fourth day of the rainy season, and they did not rest their feet until the ground had completely dried. At the end of the first dry night, a Bhikkhu was crowned Omanhin, chief of the Phante village. He was dressed in rich fabrics, his two wives on either side of him. Effia and Baba stood next to each other as they watched, and Kobe paced the crowd. Every so often, Effia could hear him muttering that she, his daughter, the most beautiful woman in the village, should be up there too. As the new chief, Bhikkhu wanted to do something big, something that would bring attention to their village and make them a force to be reckoned with. After only 3 days in office, he gathered all the men of the village to his compound. He fed them for 2 days straight, got them drunk on palm wine until their boisterous laughing and impassioned shouting could be heard from every hut. "What will they do?" Effie asked. "That does not concern you," Baba said. In the 2 months since Effie had begun to bleed, Baba had stopped beating her. Payment for silence. Some days, when they were preparing meals for the men, or when Effie would bring back the water she had fetched and watch Baba dip in with cupped hands, she would think they were finally behaving as mothers and daughters were supposed to behave. But then, other days, the long scowl would return to Baba's face, and Effie would see that her mother's new quiet was only temporary, her rage a wild beast that had been tamed for the moment. Kobe came back from the meeting with a long machete. The handle was gold with carvings of letters that no one understood. He was so drunk that all of his wives and children stood around him in a circle at a distance of 2 feet while he shuffled about, jabbing the sharp instrument in the air. "We will make the village rich with blood," he screamed. He lunged at Fifi, who had wandered into the circle, and the boy, leaner and quicker than he had been in his days as a fat baby, swiveled his hips, missing the tip of the machete by only a few inches. Fifi had been the youngest one at the meeting. Everyone knew he would make a fine warrior. They could see it in the way he climbed the palm trees, in the way he wore his silence like a golden crown. After her father left, Effia was certain that their mother had gone to sleep. Oh, excuse me. And her mother had gone to sleep. She crawled over to Fifi. "Wake up," she hissed, and he pushed her away. Even in half sleep, he was stronger than she was. She fell backward, but with the grace of a cat, flipped back onto her feet. "Wake up," she said again. Fifi's eyes flashed open. "Don't worry me, big sister," he said. "What will happen?" she asked. "It's the business of men," Fifi said. "You are not yet a man," Effia said. "And you are not yet a woman," Fifi snapped back. "Otherwise, you would have been up there with Abiku this very evening as his wife." Effia's lips began to quiver. She turned to go back to her side of the hut, but Fifi caught her arm. "We are helping the British and the Asantes with their trade." "Oh," Effia said. It was the same story she had heard from her father and Abiku just a few months before. "You mean we will give Asante gold and fabric to the white men?" Fifi clutched her tighter. "Don't be stupid," he said. "Abiku has made an alliance with one of the most powerful Asante villages. We will help them sell their slaves to the British." And so the white man came to their village, fat and skinny, red and tanned. They came in uniform with swords at their sides, their eyes looking sideways, always and ever cautious. They came to approve of the goods Abigo had promised them. In the days following the chief ceremony, Kobe had grown nervous about the broken promise of Effia's womanhood. Nervous that Abiku would forget her in favor of one of the other women in the village. He had always said that he wanted his daughter to be the first, most important wife, but now even third seemed like a distant hope. Every day he would ask Baba what was happening with Effia, and every day Baba would reply that she was not yet ready. In desperation, he decided to allow his daughter to go over to Abiku's compound with Baba once a week, so that the man could see her and remember how much he had once loved her face and figure. Arikua the Wise, the first of Abiku's wives, greeted them as they came in one evening. "Please, Mama," she said to Baba, "we weren't expecting you tonight. The white men are here." "We can go," Effia said, but Baba clutched her arm. "If you don't mind, we would like to stay," Baba said. Arikua gave her a strange look. "My husband will be angry if we come back too early," Baba said, as if that were enough of an explanation. Effia knew that she was lying. Kobe had not sent them there that night. It was Baba who had heard that the white men would be there and insisted that they go pay their respects. Ariko took pity and left to ask Abiku if the two of them might stay. "You will eat with the women, and if the men come in, you will not speak," she said. And she said once she had returned. She led them deeper into the compound. Effia watched hut after hut pass by until they entered the one where the wives had gathered to eat. She sat next to Millicent. If we remember, Millicent is a girl similar in age to Effia. She's kind of the first mixed race member of the tribe, since her mother married a British officer and then gave birth to her. And if we also remember, Effia's mom was talking to her, and she learned that, hey, if you get married off to one of the British officers, they send your family money, you get to go live in the castle, you get kind of taken care of a little bit better than you do if you marry somebody here in the village. So, maybe there's some other plans in motion that, Effia's mom has happening here. So we'll see if that pans out. Keep that in mind. Millicent, whose pregnant belly had begun to show, no bigger than a coconut slung low. Rikua had prepared fish in palm oil stew, and they dug in until their fingers were stained orange. Soon, a maidservant Effia had not noticed before came into the room. She was a tiny girl, only a child, whose eyes never lifted from the ground. "Please, Mama," she said to Rikua, "the white men would like to tour the compound. Chief Abiku says you are to make sure you are presentable for them." Go and fetch us water, quick, Millicent said, and when the servant came back with a bucket full of water, they all washed their hands and lips. Effie tidied her hair, licking her palms and rubbing her fingers along the tight baby curls that lined her edges. When she finished, Baba had her stand between Millicent and Erikua in front of the other women, and Effie tried her best to seem smaller so as not to draw attention to herself. Before long, the men came in. Abiku looked as a chief should look, Effie thought, strong and powerful, like he could lift 10 women above his head and toward the sun. 2 white men came in behind him. There was one who Effie thought must be the chief of the white men because of the way the other glanced at him before he moved or spoke. This white chief wore the same clothes as the rest of them wore, but there were more shiny gold buttons running along his coat and on the flaps of his shoulders. He seemed older than Abiku. His dark brown hair flicked with gray, but he stood up straight, as a leader should stand. These are the women, my wives and children, the mothers and daughters, Abiku said. The smaller, more timid white man watched him carefully as he said this, and then turned to the white chief and spoke their strange tongue. The white chief nodded and smiled at all of them, looking carefully at each woman and saying hello in his poor Fonte. When his hello reached Effie, she couldn't help but giggle. The other women shushed her, and embarrassment like heat began to move into her cheeks. I'm still learning, the white chief said, resting his eyes on Effie, his Fonte an ugly sound in her ears. He held her gaze for what seemed like minutes, and Effie felt her skin grow even hotter as the look in his eyes turned into something more wanton. The dark brown circles of his irises looked like large pots that toddlers could drown in, and he looked at Effie just like that, as though he wanted to keep her there, in his drowning eyes. Color quickly flooded into his cheeks. He turned to the other white man and spoke. No, she's not my wife, Abiku said after the man had translated for him, his voice not bothering to hide his annoyance. Effie hung her head, embarrassed that she had done something to cause Abiku shame. Embarrassed he could not call her his wife. Embarrassed, too, that he had not called her by name, Effie the beauty. She wanted desperately, then, to break her promise to Baba and announce herself as the woman she was. But before she could speak, the man walked away, and her nerve faded as the white chief looked over his shoulder at her and smiled. All right, so real quick before we finish up this section, what do we see seems to be happening between Effie and this new white man? Hey, good morning, Deja. So those of you who are just joining us, joining a little bit later, we are still going through our story here, Homegoing, right? We just stopped to kind of take a pause and reflect here. So those of us who are here and have been following along, what do we notice has just happened between Effie and this white man? This British soldier. How does he feel about Effie? Does he seem interested in her? Does he not really care that much? What do we think? Any thoughts on this? You can put them in the chat. You can come off mute. All right, thank you, Deja. No worries. Thank you for letting me know. All right. What do we notice in that section that we just read? How does this white man seem to be reacting to Effia? Does he seem interested in her? Does he not care? Is he more interested in somebody else in the village? Is there anything we could pick up on there? Again, remember, the more engaged we are with this stuff, the smoother, the quicker it goes. So, meaning the more people that answer and participate, the less time you guys spend looking at me waiting for you guys to answer. So, help me help you. I know it's tough to kind of read a book like this together virtually, but it's the best we can do, and I think you guys can do it. I'll reread it one more time just so everybody can hear. But let's think about this. How does this, new white man seem to feel about Effia? I'm still learning, the white chief said, resting his eyes on Effia. His fonte an ugly sound in her ears. He held her gaze for what seemed like minutes, and Effia felt her skin grow even hotter as the look in his eyes turned into something more wanton. The dark brown circles of his irises looked like large pots that toddlers could drown in, and he looked at Effia just like that, as though he wanted to keep her there in his drowning eyes. Color quickly flooded into his cheeks. He turned to the other white man and spoke. No, she is not my wife, Abiku said after the man had translated for him, his voice not bothering to hide his annoyance. Effia hung her head, embarrassed that she had not done something to cause Abiku shame. Shame. Embarrassed he could not call her wife. Embarrassed, too, that he had not called her by name, Effia the Beauty. She wanted desperately, then, to break her promise to Baba and announce herself as the woman she was. But before she could speak, the men walked away, and her nerve faded as the white chief looked over his shoulder at her and smiled. So again, what do we notice about this new white man, the white chief as she calls him, and Effia? What seems to be going on between the two of them? Does he seem to be interested in her? Does he seem to not pay too much attention to her? What does it seem like is happening here? Anybody who can tell me in the chat or over there, Mike, who is still with us and alive and not asleep today. Nobody has anything to offer for this question. I can put it in the chat too, in case you're having trouble hearing me ask it verbally. Right. There's a question in the chat. I'm going to continue reading here, but I'd like to come back to that question and see if we can get any responses. Okay. Again, ladies and gents, I know it's tough. I know the virtual thing is hard. I know all of us are kind of going at our own pace. But this is our project for this term, is trying to kind of get through as much of the story as we can. So, as I'm, if it's a day where, we're reading and I'm kind of reading out loud, you guys are following along, I ask that you guys be tuned in so that when I ask questions and stuff like this, you guys can respond. Because the more you do, the smoother and quicker this stuff will go. And it's less you guys watching me wait for you to answer and more us having a conversation about everything. Okay? All right, so we're going to continue here. We only got a little bit more to read in this section, right? And then we'll try and wrap this up with a question or two. But if there's anybody who has any thoughts about the question I just put in the chat, please do respond in there now. Okay? Thank you, guys. His name was James Collins, and he was the newly appointed governor of the Cape Coast Castle. Within a week, he had come back to the village to ask Baba for Effia's hand in marriage. Kobe's rage at the proposal filled every room like hot steam. She is all but promised to Abiku, he yelled at Baba when Baba told him she was considering the offer. Yes, but Abiku cannot marry until her blood comes, and we have been waiting years now. I tell you, husband, I think she was cursed in that fire, a demon who will never become a woman. Think about it. What creature is that beautiful but cannot be touched? All of the signs of womanhood are there, and yet still nothing. The white man will marry her regardless. He does not know what she is. Effia had heard the white man talking to her mother earlier that day. He would pay 30 pounds upfront and 25 shillings a month in tradable goods to Baba as bride gift. More than even Abiku could offer, more than had been offered for any other Fonte woman in this village or the next. And Kira says the white man does seem interested in her. Yes, I agree. And now we know for sure since he has returned to ask for her hand in marriage. And if you didn't catch the part we just read, now we might start to see, the plans in motion in Effia's mom's head. Because we just learned that, and I'll read it again. If you heard the white man talking earlier that day, he would pay 30 pounds upfront and 25 shillings a month in tradable goods to Baba as bride gift, more than even Abiku could offer, more than had been offered for any other Fonte woman in this village or the next. So obviously we see the value in Effia marrying the British officer here, okay? And now we also learn why they have been keeping her womanhood, her getting her period, a secret for so long. Right? So if you couldn't catch it, at the top of this page again, it says, "She is all but promised to Abiku," yelled Baba he yelled at Baba when Baba told him that she was considering the offer. Yes, but Abiku cannot marry her until her blood comes, and we have been waiting years now. I tell you, husband, I think she was cursed in that fire, a demon who will never become a woman. Think about it. What creature is that beautiful and cannot be touched? All of the signs of womanhood are there, yet still nothing. The white man will marry her regardless. He does not know what she is. So what have we now learned? Why did Baba keep Effia's period a secret for so long? Why did they not tell anybody else that she had gotten her period? We know it has to do with the white man being interested in her, and we just learned, they get all this money up front, and they get tradable goods every month, as a gift. If she gets married to the white guy, so what's the reason that they kept her having her period a secret? All right, I'll put that in the chat as well. Why does she need to keep it a secret? What happens, or who does she have to marry instead if they find out she gets her period? Did we catch that anywhere? Right. So he's not poor, but he just can't offer as much as the white man. So his name is Abiku. If you can't remember, I'll put that in the chat. But he's definitely not poor. He's the new chief of the village, but he can't offer as much as the white man is willing to offer. And now we see her mother probably knows that, and that's why she kept it a secret, because she knows if they find out she's had her period, then she has to marry him because he wants her. He's already kind of like chosen her to be his wife, but the longer she goes without getting her period, the less interested he gets, and now she sees the British guy is interested, so maybe we get a better deal out of this here. All right, good job, Kira. Thank you. Effie could hear her father pacing all throughout the evening. She even awoke the next morning to the same sound, the steady rhythm of his feet on the hard clay earth. "We must make Abiku think it was his idea," he finally said. And so the chief was called to their compound. He sat beside Kobe as Baba told him her theory, that the fire that had destroyed so much of their family's worth had also destroyed the child. "She has the body of a woman, but something evil lurks in her spirit," Baba said, spitting on the ground for emphasis. "If you marry her, she will never bear your children. If the white man marries her, he will think of this village fondly, and your trade will prosper from it." Biku rubbed his beard carefully as he thought about it. "Bring the beauty to me," he said finally. Kobe's second wife brought Effia into the room. She was trembling and her stomach pained her so much that she thought she might empty her bowels right there in front of everyone. Abiku stood up so that he was facing her. He ran his fingers. I'm just checking who we got in here. Oh, Keon, welcome, my friend. All right. Abiku stood up so that he was facing her. He ran his fingers along the full landscape of her face, the hills of her cheeks, the caves of her nostrils. A more beautiful woman has never been born," he said finally. He turned to Baba. "But I see that you are right. If the white man wants her, he may have her." Oh, excuse me. "All the better for our business with them. All the better for the village." So we can see now they've kind of spun it and convinced Abiku, like, hey, this is the right decision to let her marry the British guy because it'll be better for our village's trade. When in fact they know that they just get more value from her marrying the British guy because he's offering more in terms of bridal gifts. Right? Kobe, big, strong man that he was, began to weep openly, but Baba stood tall. She walked over to Effia after Abiku had left and handed her a black stone pendant that shimmered as though it had been coated in gold dust. She slipped it into Effia's hands and then leaned into her until her lips were touching Effia's ear. "Take this with you when you go," Baba said. "A piece of your mother." And when Baba finally pulled away, Effia could see something like relief dancing behind her smile. Okay. We're going to stop there today because we only got a few minutes left. And what I would like us to do is, if we can, try and come up with an answer to this last question that I'm going to put in the chat now. Okay? So if you were following along, you just heard Effia's mom gave her a gift, that black stone pendant. They said it was almost shimmering like gold. And she leans in and whispers, "Take this with you when you go," because now she knows Effie's going to have to go marry the British guy and go off to the castle. And then the narrator tells us, Baba almost, seems relieved when when Effie sees her face, that all this stuff is happening. So the last question we have for today is, why do you think she gives her that gift? What do you think this symbolizes? What does it mean? Why does she give it to her? All right. That's the question I want us to answer. We got about 2-3 minutes left. So please come up with some thoughts, come up with an answer for that question. Put it in the chat now. All right. As soon as I see your response in the chat, then you are good to go for today. But please remember that we have an all-school assembly at 11:30. So I hope to see you go right from here to there. If you are able to attend, you should attend. We'll be giving out some shout outs for progress reports, right? Gift cards up for grabs, and I believe we are trying to switch to Visa gift cards or Cash App this time. So it's not just on Amazon, okay? But again, look at that question in the chat, and I want to see some responses from you guys before you go today. Right? If you're unable to respond to me in the chat before you go, you can take a screenshot, copy and paste, and you can answer me in a Google Hangouts message or an email. But that is the question I would like to get answered from you today. Okay. What do we think about the gift that she gets? All right. What do you think it might mean? Why do you think she gave it to her? What are your thoughts on that? Again, please put your response to that in the chat before you go, okay? Okay, all right, so let's take about another minute, and then I do have to kind of wrap up here and get ready for the assembly. So I should see that, or I want to see some responses to that question, if you can, in the chat before we go. All right. If I don't see him in the chat, then I will send this in an email, and you guys can answer me there as well. Okay. If you still feel like a little lost, if you came in late or you missed class on Friday where we started the story, the best ways to get caught up are watching the recordings on YouTube again, or coming to the Summit Lab. I haven't seen anybody in the Summit Lab yet. So hopefully that changes as we get a little bit later into the term. So if you are lost, if you're stumped and you have questions, that is the best place to go. So please come see me in there. And remember, you can use, it's the same link for the Summit Lab as it is for this class, right? So the page number we ended on, Kira, if you're following along on the PDF, we ended on, let me see. We ended about halfway down. We ended about halfway down page 20. Okay. So if you're following along on that PDF link, we ended about halfway down page 20. All right. All right, ladies and gents, I do have to wrap up here. I'm going to put this question in an email to our class, since I didn't get any responses in the chat. And then you can email me your answers there. Okay. I will see you all again on Friday, and I will see you in a few minutes at our all school assembly. Okay. Please do attend if you can. All right. And I do ask, if we come back on Friday, we're going to be doing a little bit more work on Summit on Friday, but every time we are trying to read from the book, and I'm reading aloud again, the more engaged, the more into it you guys are, the smoother it will go. And the less you guys will just be watching me wait for you guys to answer stuff, which I know is boring and not super fun. So the way to avoid that is, let's all be in it together and kind of tuned in. All right. So thank you guys again. Stay safe, and I will see you all in a few at the assembly. All right. Thank you guys.